What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today we're going to be having a look at another really good Transformers deck. A proven to be good Transformers deck. On this channel and on my other channel, Wossy Plays, I like to bring you decks that have proven to be good to give you something to test against to let you know what's going on in the metagame. I showed you the Double Primes deck the other day. Today we're back with Insecticons. Now this is the list with which John Palmer went and played at PAX Unplugged. It was actually shared by the official Transformers trading card game Facebook group. Though John has done an article explaining the deck, I will of course pop a link to that one in the description. And John ended up with a mark of 12-3 at PAX. He went 5-0, 3-2 and 4-1. That's a pretty good mark. And for everyone who's been thinking, well, hang on a second, DINOBOTS or Insecticons, who's better? The early leader, and I must stress again, we don't know very much. We had a couple tournaments at PAX Unplugged, and that was lovely, but we are in super early days at the moment. But the early leader is Insecticons. Now, if you look at this image shared by the Transformers Facebook group, the one thing you should notice, no blue pips. There are no blue pips at all in this deck. It is full aggro. Now, of course, with it being Insecticons, it's got to be a 4-wide. It had to be a 4-wide, ladies and gentlemen. So we end up with Barrage here. Barrage is a 7 cost. It's got 11 health, which is slightly below average, but then again, so is the cost. But what's really good about this is the attack. 5 in bot mode, 3 in alt mode. But when you are in bot mode and you're attacking a damaged enemy, you get bold 2. Which means you flip a couple of extra battle cards when you attack. And given that you've gone almost exclusively white and orange pips, that is going to give you more than 5 attack here. Now, fairly obviously, we're playing Skrapnel. Skrapnel is the 7 cost. Skrapnel is the rare. Skrapnel is the one that really did stand out when we first saw Insecticons. Now, the defense of 0 in bot mode kind of sucks, but again, you got an attack of 5, which is above average on a below average cost card. But what we really love about this is in bot mode, you can't take more than 3 from a single attack. So even though you've only got 7 health, which is lower than the average of 12, you cannot take more than 3 from a single attack. Which means you are going to be free hit unless your opponent is using some kind of, some people call it direct damage. I prefer cheeky damage, but something like Plasma Burst to do some extra damage there. So that's pretty nice. We then see Kickback and Ransack, and if we start off with Kickback here, we see, I think it's got 0 attack. But it's not really 0 attack in bot mode, is it? Because when you're attacking, you flip 2 more battle cards for each Insecticon with which you began the game. Which means, and it doesn't matter if they get KO'd, you started the game. So you've got essentially 8 battle cards being flipped every time you attack. And remember, we are going full on orange and white pips here. Which is redonk, ladies and gentlemen. So actually, this is going to have just an obscene damage output, given that it is a 5-cost character. And then, of course, in bot mode, you can repair 1 damage from one of your Insecticons when you repair, which is quite nice. And actually, I've not been focusing enough on the alt modes here. Don't forget that Barrage in alt mode, when you flip to it, one of your characters gets pierced 2 until the end of the turn, guaranteeing that damage, which shouldn't really be needed all that often given the obscene damage output we're rolling with here, but it's nice to have. And Skrapnel, when you flip it into alt mode, you can KO one of your Insecticons and tap a character that has 13 or fewer stars. Cool. Sounds like fun. And then finally we see Ransack here, finishes us out quite nicely. The character's attack is equal to the number of damage counters on him. Okay, so ideally here you have 7 damage counters on and you've got a 7 cost. And although we're not looking at it yet, I've got to mention I Still Function. Because I Still Function revives a KO'd character, repair 1 damage from it, and it lasts for 1 turn. Which means that when you bring it back for 1 turn with 7 attack. That's pretty sweet. And then in alt mode, when you flip to it, you move 2 damage counters from another character to this one. Can be useful in terms of getting the damage on there. Okay, so there are 4 Insecticons, and we can see here that the goal is damage. Skrapnel's a little bit of a sponge, which is quite nice. But with all the others, we're just trying to do the damage. Barrage, you attack a damaged character, and you've got a 5 attack with bold 2. And then Skrapnel's got a 5 attack, which is not amazing without anything extra, but you're a bit of a sponge. Kickback, you're essentially flipping 8 battle cards when you attack. And Ransack, at least at points in the game, is going to be a 7 attack. And bearing in mind you're 4 wide. So as a 4 wide deck, you're supposed to be a little bit weaker. You're supposed to not be hitting that much, but it's alright because you're hitting with more cards. You're getting extra attacks. You're essentially getting 2 extra attacks against Nemesis Prime, Optimus Prime. You're attacking twice as much as they are. And yet, you've got enough power here that it's not as bad as it should be. And that's why we have to go big onto the orange pips here. It's why we've got to do this, because this deck just lends itself to maximizing damage. So if we have a look through them, we start off with 3 copies of Grenade Launcher. Grenade Launcher is a phenomenal upgrade. It's got the orange pip, we need that. But it gives you an extra 4 attack, but just for 1 attack and then it goes away. But as we've seen, we're maximizing it, that's quite nice. If you want it to stay on there, how about Flamethrower? Now, Flamethrower gives you bold 2, so rather than upping your attack, you get extra bold, which a lot of the time does actually work out better than just being +2 attack. And again, you've got the orange pips. We need the orange pips, because as we've said, we're focusing on attack, we're focusing on bold, etc. So the fact that they have orange pips as well helps. We actually see a copy of Static Laser of Ironhide. Now, I adore this inclusion, because it gives you +3 attack, which is good. The downside is you've got to put 2 damage onto a character. But actually, we got Ransack here, whose damage is equal to the number of damage counters on him. So this can actually be a really nice way to get a couple of cheeky damage onto him, while giving him +3 attack. And if you can engineer this correctly, you essentially end up with 10 attack, which is quite ridiculous. We do see 3 copies of Swarm. Swarm is a phenomenal action card here. Again, we've got the orange pips. And you flip a battle card for each Insecticon with which you started the game. Bearing in mind that's going to be 4. And like we said before, if they're KO'd, it doesn't matter. It's who you started the game with. And every orange you flip, your opponent chooses one of their characters and takes a damage counter. Now, it's their choice, but they've still got to take it. For each blue you flip, you repair 1 damage, but you ain't going to be flipping any blue. You might flip some whites, which kind of sucks. But if you're lucky here, you can be doing an extra 4 damage. And yes, your opponent chooses where it goes, but that's still pretty disruptive. We see a full 3 copies of Supercharge. Supercharge is the best action card we've got for bold. Well, I suppose if you're playing a Dinobot deck, we've got Dino Chomp. Except we're not, so we don't. Gives you bold 3, which is often going to be better than +3 attack. Bold 3 is good, especially in a deck with this many orange icons. We see Incoming Transmission. Stop me if you've heard this before. It's got an orange pip. You draw 2 cards and then you put a card from your hand on top of your deck. Now, the draw power is good, but you also get to put a card on top of your deck. And this is a really good time to mention that we play full 3 copies of both of the orange pip cards, the double orange pip cards. That being Improvised Shield and Peace Through Tyranny. You don't really want to use those 2 cards. You want them in your deck to flip them when you're attacking. They are there for the double orange pips. They are not there for the actual effect of the card. And what's really nice about Incoming Transmission is, if you've got one of those cards in your hand, you don't want to play it, so you put it on top of your deck, ready to attack and hit the double orange pip. Now, as a side note, you can use them. Improvised Shield gives you tough 1. It's not really all that relevant, given that you're probably not going to hit many blue pips in this deck. And Peace Through Tyranny. Allows you to KO one of your characters with 6 stars or more, and if you do, you get to take a turn after this one. Now, you couldn't use this on Kickback because it's a 5 cost. All the others you could. There will be times when you're like, oh, I really want to take the next turn. Yay, I can. But to be clear, that's going to be the exception rather than the rule. It's in there for the double orange pips. Now, we do see Force Field here, which has a white pip. But then again, you hit Force Field, which flips you 2 extra cards, hopefully swapping 1 white pip for 2 orange pips. That's good for me. And Force Field guarantees that you only take 4 damage from an attack, not unlike Skrapnel's ability. I've been telling you in many, many videos, I'm not playing a deck without free Force Field. Maybe one day, but I haven't found one yet that I want to. It's really good for stopping damage, and the white pip is good. And while we're talking about Force Field here, it might be worth having a quick mention about Ramming Speed. Now, we're only playing 2 Ramming Speed, but Ramming Speed lets you discard one of your opponent's upgrades, which could be really, really handy against an opponent's Force Field, and yes, it's got an orange pip. I mean, it can get rid of any of your opponent's upgrades, it's something to bear in mind, but Force Field is the one that really jumps to me here, isn't, yeah, you're going to want that to get rid of that. We play 2 copies of Zap. I love Zap. You just do 1 damage to an enemy, and generally speaking, it's quite weak as it goes. We mentioned Plasma Burst earlier, which does 2 damage to an enemy, but Zap's got an orange icon, which is good, and this is a deck which relies on spamming damage. So that 1 extra damage could be the difference between KOing a character and not KOing a character. We actually see 2 copies of Treasure Hunt here. Now, I quite like Treasure Hunt. It's got the orange pip, obviously. You scrap the top 4 cards of your deck and put all upgrade scrap this way into your hand. It's a really nice way of digging for a Force Field if you want it, but remember the static laser of Ironhide is going to be really, really good, but only on particular turns, and you're only playing 1 copy of it, so it's really nice to allow you to dig for that. We play 2 copies of Datapad. Now the white icon here is quite nice, because again, if you're playing so many orange icons, you play a couple of white, and then hopefully you only hit 1 white per attack, which lets you flip 2 extra icons, so that white isn't an orange, but hopefully it becomes 2 oranges. When the upgraded character attacks, draw a card, then you may put a card from your hand on top of your deck. And we talked about this a moment ago when we talked about incoming transmission. You're playing all 6 possible double orange cards, so it's really nice if you're able to get one of those on top of your deck. We play 1 debilitating crystal. White icon is quite nice. When you attack, you return one of the defending character's upgrades to its owner's hand. Now, we talked about this a minute ago with Ramming Speed. You can get rid of something like a Force Field, and your opponent can just play it back down the following turn. That is an option that they have. But then again, it's their only upgrade they can play that turn. You're still putting them back a turn doing so. We see 3 copies of I Still Function. Now, I Still Function is the powerhouse card in this deck. No, it doesn't have an icon, and that's a little bit sad. But just look at your Insecticons for a moment here. Barrage comes back, and it's a 5 power or a 5 attack with bold 2. That's pretty nice. Insecticon Skrapnel comes back as a nice little 5 power here. Kickback comes back, and you're basically flipping 8 battle cards when attacking, but Ransack. If you use it with Ransack, and we mentioned this earlier, you bring him back as a 7 attack just for the 1 turn. It's a little bit ridiculous. And then finally we see 3 copies of One Shall Stand, One Shall Fall. Again, there's no icon here, and like we just saw with I Still Function, if you're playing a card with 0 icons, it had better be pretty gosh darn good. Choose one of your characters and an enemy character. Do 3 damage to each of them. Well, you've got a character that really wants to have damage on so you can attack more. Your opponent generally doesn't want to take the damage. It's a kind of same theory we have with Zap. Cheeky damage is good. I adore this deck. I think John did a wonderful job making this deck, and I think it is a legitimate challenger to double primes when we're talking about best deck. bit of cheeky damage, hyper aggressive, lots of orange icons, 0 blue icons. You can see the whole list on the screen here. It is just fun. And it is proving that, at least for the moment, Insecticons are winning the war against DINOBOTS. Do make sure you're checking out John's article over on Vector Sigma. I will, of course, like I said, pop a link to that one in the description. But for now, I want to know what you think about Insecticons. Are you buying it as a legitimate deck? Do you think it's a bit overrated? Let me know in the comment section. Go nuts. But please do remember the rule. Be nice, would ya? And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and follow me on Twitter at the Wossy for some more Transformers and other rambling. But by far the most important thing, as always, is to look after yourselves. Until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Ross, and you've been watching Wossy Plays.